Hi everyone and welcome to a new video. Today's video is going to be a sewing video. As you may have seen, I once made a Victorian corset, this one. Every time I've worn this, I've worn a modern day slip dress underneath. But since I'm going to be making more corsets from different time periods, and one day I really want to make a full-on historical outfit, probably Victorian, I thought it was a good idea to make a somewhat historical chemise so that I can then wear that underneath my corset, and then I will already have one, well technically two because I have a corset, but I will have another foundation layer ready for when I want to make a full outfit. The pattern I found on this website called Tudor Links, and they actually have a whole library of historical patterns. So this one is a lady chemise. It's supposed to look something like this once it's finished. It's a very simple chemise with some lace around the neckline and the armholes. And this pattern is from 1889 and was reprinted in 1893. So yeah, it's a somewhat Victorian pattern. It just gives you the pattern piece for, this is the front and back. So first thing I did was convert the measurements to centimeters. And then I did some calculations and realized that this would be pretty big. So I made it a little bit smaller. And I know it's not supposed to be tight fitting, and I know it's supposed to be a little bit loose, but with these measurements it would be really big. So I scaled it down just a little bit. And so I wrote down all the measurements for the chemise that I will be making. And then for the fabric, I have this white 100% linen, and I've already pre-washed this on the delicate cycle because I only plan on washing this on delicate when it's finished. And then I also have some linen thread to go with this. It's a really strong thread, and I will be sewing this completely by hand. I really wanted something strong that would last, and it's really nice to use a thread. It's the same material as the fabric you're using, so linen on linen. So that's my fabric and my thread. So now first step is to get the pattern drawn on some pattern paper so that I can then transfer it to the fabric. So let's get started. So this is the pattern drawn out, and I've already made some changes. Whilst I was drawing this out, I realized that this piece was going to be very short because, let's see, the original shoulder seam is here, so it would be just this little bit, and that's just not going to work. So I made this a little bit longer, and also made the overall length of the chemise a bit longer, because obviously when I was scaling it down, I scaled everything down, so also the length. So I just added some extra centimeters, and now it's nice and long. I added a seam allowance. Now I am ready to cut this out and start transferring this to my actual fabric. pieces are now cut out and I've drawn the stitch lines on here. So now I'm ready to assemble the chemise. It's going to be pretty simple because there are only 2 side seams and then 2 shoulder seams. And I want to start with the side seams. So I'm going to first pin the seam, right sides together, making sure it's all lined up nicely. And then just pin along the stitch line. And now I'm ready to start sewing. So for this seam I want to use the running back stitch because there's not going to be an extreme amount of stress on this seam, so I don't need a full-on back stitch, but I like the extra security of a running back stitch. So I'm going to start and I'm just going to do a little back stitch to secure this end. Like this, nice and secure. And now I'm going to start by doing a second back stitch to start the running back stitch. And just making a few running stitches and pulling the thread through, nice and secure. And this is the beginning of our seam, so I'm going to do this for this whole thing. So here we have a really nice, strong side seam. And now I'm going to move on to the shoulder seam. For this I will be using a back stitch. I'm going to start here at the edge and do the first back stitch to anchor it. And then back stitch all the way across. And this is the shoulder seam done. So I'm going to quickly sew the other side seam and the other shoulder seam, and then I'll see you for the next step. Now I need to finish the seams. Just make sure to encase the raw edges so that it doesn't fray. And I mean, this is linen, so it will fray if you even breathe in this direction. So it's very important to finish the seams nicely. So what I'm going to do is press the seam first in the opposite direction. And now I'm going to trim one side of the seam allowance, this side. Here we go. And now I'm going to press the seam over the other side. I'm going to fold this part over and under, and I'm going to press this and immediately pin this to my ironing board carefully because I don't want to burn my hands. And this way it will cool down nicely and stay like this. So I need to do this for the entire seam. So this is then what the seam looks like on the outside. And now that this is done, I need to move on to get these edges finished. For this neckline, I need to gather this. I've made a little cut in the corner here so that I can fold it over, because otherwise that would be impossible. And fold it over twice. Pin it into place. Like this. And then I'm going to do the rest later. You don't need to see all of that. And then for this, where I need to gather, I'm going to use a really long running stitch. And now I can just pull on this and gather it slightly. I just tried it on and I don't need to gather it too much, so I think this will be enough. And then I need to just move this around and sew that into place when I attach the trim. But I'm quickly going to pin the rest of these edges and fell these down, and then I can move on to the trim. So now that it's time for the lace trim, my original plan was to just buy some lace trim, but then I thought I would challenge myself and I decided I wanted to make my own. So I got some knitting patterns for some lace trim that's, I believe, Victorian, and I made a couple of swatches and these two ended up being the winners. I'm thinking of using this one for the neckline and then this one for the armhole edge. Now for the yarn I'm going to use for this, I have this yarn, the Chemise Maxi Sweet Treat, and this is the yarn I use for the swatches, but obviously this is blue and I really don't want a blue lace trim. So I ended up trying something, which is to bleach this yarn. So I first bleached a couple of single strands of this yarn and I was really happy to see that it bleached to a really nice white. So then I got one of these swatches that didn't make the final cut and I bleached the entire swatch to see if that would work as well, and it did. So here we have it, and this means that I can just knit the entire length of lace that I need using the yarn as it is, and then bleach it when it's done. So I'm going to go ahead and start working on this lace, and I will see you when it's done. I've just put the chemise on my dress form because I now want to pin on the lace. I'm not sure if I want to apply the lace or attach the lace to the outside like this, so that it lays over the edge and the edge of the lace is visible from the outside, or if I want to attach it to the inside like this, so that the edge is visible and then the lace edge is hidden underneath. Looking at it now, I think I'm going to go with this. So I'm gonna pin this underneath to see what it looks like. I want to start with the main neckline. I should have just made these pieces separately and then sewn them on and connected them somehow, but I didn't. So this is what it would look like once it's sewn on, and I think I'm happy with the placement. Looking at it now, I do really like how it looks with the lace underneath. So here it is up close, and I think it's looking really nice. So we've got 2 different lace edges, and I think I'm ready to start actually sewing this on. And once that's done, we can go to the final reveal. And here she is, the chemise in all her glory. I've just quickly put her on a mannequin to show some more details and also look at some points I could have done differently. If we look at the back, you can see I've added a little bow right here. I didn't have enough lace, so I needed something to bridge the gap, so I just used some scrap yarn and made a little braid and made a little bow. Then to kind of tie this blue color in with the rest of the chemise, I added a couple of strands of the blue yarn through the lace. That way it's not just a random blue bow at the back of the chemise, and it just adds a little bit of visual interest and a little bit of color. So I'm really happy with that. Some things I could have done differently. I definitely, when I scaled down, maybe scaled down too much because this is supposed to be gathered. But that would have been too small on me, so it's not really gathered at all. And I did already lengthen the shoulder straps quite a bit, but it still is a little bit tight around my arms, but that's also due to me scaling it down improperly. But apart from that, I'm really happy with the end result. It's very gratifying to sew something by hand. It only took me a couple of days, which surprised me. I thought it would take much longer than it did. But it didn't. And yes, I know I could have used my sewing machine and store-bought lace, and this could have been done in maybe an hour or less. But this was way more gratifying, rewarding, and I just really like the idea of sewing a historical garment using historical techniques. So I'm very happy. I really like how it turned out, and I will be wearing this with my Victorian corset for sure. And you will see you will definitely see this one again in other videos when I make more corsets for my corset series. So stay tuned. Thank you for watching. I hope you have a great day, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.